Some people can't cope with much. Any little circumstance or inconvenience will completely derail them. Now there's some others who are a little bit tougher. They can endure a little bit more, and when bad things happen, they fight through it and they survive. But there's a few people, just a few, who can not only endure hardship, but absorb it and then thrive. These are the people that we need to be out here looking for. These the cats we need to be studying and learning from. People like the subject of today's video, Jacob Rainey, a kid who was on track to become a D1 quarterback before an unimaginable stroke of horrible luck should have ended it all. Now I gotta give a shout out to one of my subscribers named Jackson. In last week, What Happened to Amari Cooper video, he requested that I do a video on Jacob Rainey. I looked into it and this guy has an amazing story. So shout out to you, Jackson. Now again, we'll be doing at least one What Happened to video every single week. So if you have any requests, any suggestions, leave it in the comment section. Now it's time for you to sit back and let me tell you the story of Jacob Rainey, the one-legged quarterback. Cue the Wayne. Alright, real quick, I gotta give a shout out to today's video sponsor, Global Test Market. Global Test Market provides a cool, easy way to earn a little bit of extra bread. Essentially, you're taking surveys and giving your opinion on some of your favorite and least favorite brands. Now, the feedback that you provide helps improve said brand and put a little bit of extra cash in your pocket. Yeah, that's the good part. Now, I've checked it out myself and it's actually pretty cool. If you want to check it out, all you gotta do is click my link in the description box, start earning some extra bread ASAP. Lastly, I want to thank Global Test Market for sponsoring the video. Without further ado, let's get it. Just like me and the majority of people that are watching this video, Jacob Rainey grew up wanting to be a professional football player. He grew up in Virginia, which is one of the most populated states in the country that has no NFL team. Therefore, Jacob grew up a Washington Redskins fan. His parents bought him the full uniform and he wore it every chance he got. Halloween, he was a football player. Career day, football player. Birthday party theme? Yeah, you already know what it is. Jacob naturally gravitated to the quarterback position as a middle schooler, and he took football pretty damn seriously, as after 2 years of high school, he left his friends behind and transferred to Woodbury High School to increase his chances of being recruited to a D1 program. His new school recommended Jacob repeat his sophomore year because they would, air quote, help with the NCAA recruiting process. Early on, Jacob split time at quarterback. He followed a strict diet, trained hours each day, and attended as many football camps as he could. And you know what? The training paid off. Going into his junior season, Jacob was 6'4", 230 pounds. He recorded a 4.6 40 during a camp that he attended at the University of Virginia. Now obviously, there's a lot more to playing the quarterback position than size and speed. But Jacob's combination of the two, he was definitely gonna be a D1 athlete and probably a pretty damn good one. There were quite a few schools who thought the exact same thing, with Virginia, Virginia Tech, Vanderbilt, Duke, and Wake Forest all recruiting a young Jacob. At this point, all Jacob wanted to do was keep his head clear and prepare for the upcoming season. He felt physically better than he ever had, and during an early scrimmage held on September 3rd, 2012, Jacob was looking like a rising star. The right-handed QB dropped back on a play-action pass, pushed off his right leg, and bam, blasted a 40-yard strike to one of his wide receivers. Little did he know, he'd never be able to do that again. No one had been able to tackle Jacob all day. With his size and strength, he had shrugged off tackle after tackle. But the next play after the 40-yard pass, something went wrong. Jacob was tackled low by one of the smallest kids on the other team, and this was a situation where there's no ill intent. It was just tough to bring this guy down, so he went for the legs. Unfortunately for Jacob, regardless of intent, his knee gave way, and it was pretty gruesome. Here's what Woodbury Forest athletic trainer had to say about it. It was horrible. One of the worst things I've ever seen. The knee had dislocated both posteriorly and laterally. There was just this obvious deformity. At this point, Jacob's crying out, "My season, my season." He thought he had blown out his knee, which is a terrible injury and takes a considerable amount of time to shake back from. But little did Jacob know, this was much worse. He was rushed to the hospital and his first surgery took place only a few hours after the injury had occurred. The doctors had to replace a ruptured artery in his right leg with a vein from his left. 4 days later, they operated again. And this time, they had to literally cut both sides of his leg open to remove damaged muscle tissue. 2 days later, Jacob was informed that they needed yet another surgery, but this one would be different. And Jacob's dad, who had to deliver the news, said it was the hardest thing he ever had to do. He had to tell his son, a kid who was in love with the game of football and had been since he was little, that the doctors could not save his leg. It had to be amputated. Can you imagine? A week later, after Jacob's final surgery, Jacob sat up in his hospital bed and he looked down at what was left of his leg. There wasn't much left as it was an above the knee amputation. Jacob had stayed strong to this point. He had held it all in, but as he sat there looking at his bandaged leg, he finally broke down into tears. He says at that moment, it all set in and he realized that though his life was far from over, it had been drastically altered. Jacob had to spend nearly a month in the hospital, then the next month and a half at his parents' house. No school, no football, no fun. I mean, the emotional pain and distress of losing a leg is enough to break most people. But please do not overlook the physical pain. And the painkillers the doctors prescribed never seemed to be quite enough. The pain was so bad that he couldn't get any sleep. And during this process, the kid lost over 60 pounds. Jacob's mom asked doctors about the chances of her son ever playing football again. They said it could never happen. As Jacob wallowed in self-pity, his mom had had enough. She looked at Jacob in the face and said, "You know what? You Jacob Rainey. They don't know what you are or are not capable of as an amputee." And before we move on with the story, I just want to establish mom's a real one. Jacob's mom started wearing a wristband that said, "Take a stand, number 9. She did this in hopes to motivate her son. And soon, the team and the rest of the community started wearing them. They represented for Jacob and did everything they could to inspire him. They wore t-shirts and everything. All the proceeds from the t-shirts and wristbands or anything else went to Jacob's family to help with medical expenses. It definitely helped, but not as much as the next thing that happened. One of Jacob's friends had a connection with the Tim Tebow Foundation. Now, Tim was not only a player who Jacob was compared to based on his play style, he was also Jacob's favorite player. Now, keep in mind, this was during the year 2012, right around the height of Tebow mania. So when Jacob got a personal invite to see Tim Tebow play, he nearly lost it. Tim and Jacob had a conversation and Tebow gave him some words of encouragement. It really helped to lift Jacob, and it honestly may have done even more for Tim Tebow. Later that year, a few days before Christmas, Jacob got his first prosthetic leg. He put it on, moved around a little bit, and he thought to himself, "There's no way I'm playing football in this. I can barely walk." 1 month later, he was throwing the football again. He started working with a physical therapist who helped Jacob get more and more comfortable in his prosthetic leg. He was learning fast, but the basic prosthetic was taking a huge toll on Jacob's leg, right in the socket where his leg met with the prosthetic. It was crazy painful, and Jacob would often have to switch over to his crutches just to relieve the pain. Quick side story, it'll all make sense in a second. In 2008, a guy by the name of Mike Scholes lost his leg in a snowmobile race. His leg was amputated, but he quickly got frustrated with the limitations of his prosthetic, so he invented an extreme prosthetic called the Moto Knee, and he used it to win a gold medal in snowboarding in the Paralympics. GOAT. Now, if not for that invention, Jacob's story as we know it may have stopped here, but instead, something that took crazy amounts of heart actually transpired. Jacob adjusted quickly to the new prosthetic, and about 1 year after having his leg amputated, Jacob became the first above-knee amputee to start in a full contact football game. In his very first game, Jacob played the first drive. He actually completed a screen pass, but mostly handed the ball off. Regardless, he led the team down the field and they scored a touchdown on the first drive. Can you imagine how amped up his team must have been? Because they were able to go and score that touchdown when Jacob was obviously very limited. He only played that first drive, but after Jacob came out, they didn't seem to have that same magic, and they ended up losing that game. Now, Jacob only ended up playing in about 5 games that season, and though his plays were pretty limited, the man threw like 4 touchdowns that year on one leg. He even had a 2-touchdown game versus their rival in a close victory. Jacob spent most of his time encouraging his teammates from the sideline, and while many of the schools that were recruiting him before his injury had all but disappeared, one of the schools who had recruited Jacob from the very beginning decided, yeah, they were still interested. That school was the University of Virginia. They wanted to bring Jacob in as a preferred walk-on, meaning a guaranteed spot on the team, same as a scholarship player. Only difference is you have to pay out of pocket. Jacob decided to take Virginia up on that offer. Virginia was one of the top schools on Jacob's list pre-injury, and he decided to go ahead and see that through, even though his role would be much different now. When Jacob got to Virginia, he was focused on playing, but it seems that the coaches really had something different in mind for Jacob. And after they sat down and talked, Jacob and the coaches decided it'd be better for Jacob to develop some new skills so that when he left school, he can build a new life for himself. At the same time, he could still stay close to the game that he loved. So the coaches took Jacob under their wing. They started by having him cut up game film and help come up with some schemes they could use to help the team strategically. Jacob's responsibilities would continue to grow throughout the entire time he was there, with him eventually gaining recruiting duties and many more. After his time at Virginia, Jacob used the skills that he learned there to land a gig at UCLA as an offensive quality control assistant. Jacob did that for about a year until a few months back, he decided to switch industries. Today, he's an executive recruiter for Parker & Lynch, where he puts his recruiting skills to good use. So despite some major setbacks and crazy hardships, Jacob Rainey, he's still standing.